Nou ja, hier sit ek nou vanmiddag en ek het vir Hein Marx weer by my. But I have received a hell of a lot of inquiries and questions around secession and UDI and all of that. So I thought it would be a good thing to talk to somebody that actually understands the technicalities of both processes. Hein, can you give us a short overview of the difference between secession and UDI?
Yeah, it's put it this way: the international community, and in terms of international law, um, the whole idea is to have a whole process of secession go through rather than a UDI, Unilateral Declaration of Independence. Quite simply because a UDI is normally declared because you are forced into a corner, you don't have a choice, and you declare independence. Obviously, there's a big risk on that because if one other country, international accepted country, doesn't accept that UDI, then, well, you're stuck because then it's not a UDI. With a secession process, it's a total different story. It takes years, and it was designed that you go through a legal process of basically, also to use the legal term, to exhaust all internal but all revenues or avenues. Sorry. So the long and the short is that it was designed to be a very long, and long I'm talking about many years process to do secession. The nice thing about that side is that once you've done that and you then declare a UDI, it's very, very difficult for the international community or the International Criminal Court to say, well, no, you can't, it can't be accepted. Quite simply because you have then ticked all the boxes. So, to make a long story short, you can declare a UDI if you are painted into a corner, exactly the way that Rhodesia was painted into a corner. And don't make a mistake, Rhodesia was basically left totally in the dark by their so-called call it protector, which was England. So they didn't have a choice; they had to go on their own. Obviously, there was a lot of other smaller intricacies going on, but the long and the short is they didn't have a choice. And because it was England, and England was the bad one in the story here, well, that sounds familiar. Normally they are, but the long and the short is because it was England, um, a lot of the countries didn't accept the UDI, and this is
Okay.
exactly what I'm saying. It's always better to go the route of secession. And the
Okay.
interesting thing is, like any bureaucracy, if you stick to the rules, if you stick to the call it prescribed forms, just to use it as an analogy, then nobody can fault you.
Okay. If I make the following statement, say a country, a group of people, say this is our land, and we go UDI, and they have an international backer that immediately recognizes the UDI. Where are we then?
Then you've basically you've declared a totally 100% positive unilateral declaration of independence. Simple as that.
Okay, so if a grouping wants to sidestep or bypass that long, lengthy secession path, if they have a good international backer, the UDI is the right move for them to do.
Well, it's the quickest way then, obviously. But again, it's not that simple as to say, well, we are now declaring a UDI. Um, it will be, and it's quite logic that the same as with a secession, the international community would like to know what kind of government system you're going to have, what kind of internal policies you're going to have, what kind of economic policy are you going to have. So it's not a matter of one morning somebody wakes up and says, "Well, I've got a good relationship whoever, president of a country, I'm going to declare a UDI, and they do it. And there's no backing in terms of what they are, who they are, where they want to go to. Because remember, international law also says everything that you do, but it also says everything that you plan to do, you've got to make known to the international community, well, to your own people and the international community. And it's quite simple. It's like, let's say, for instance, I see your heading is Zulus. Let's say, for instance, the Zulus would like to declare a UDI. Same story. If they want to declare a UDI, what kind of governorship, government are they going to have? Most probably a monarchy. No problem. What kind of internal laws are they going to have? What kind of international relations will they have? What kind of trade will they have? It's all these smaller things, which, by the way, you sit down and you do it and it's done. But you've got to do it.
Okay. So I've received messages from people that tells me that at a stage the Zulus were on the way to go independent. Do you know anything about that process?
Yeah, I think it's a bit far to say they were on their way to do it, but I'd put it differently. They were definitely looking at the whole concept of secession. In fact, P.W. Botha and myself and his wife Barbara were once the guests of King Goodwill Zwelithini and Inkatha's Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And the whole idea was to also talk about, if they would go independent, how would we see it? How would we react? And I mean, obviously, I can tell you that we see it as very positive, obviously. So, yes, they definitely looked at it. I don't know exactly how the inner workings of the monarchy then worked now after King Goodwill Zwelithini died. But yeah, for many years, actually nothing happened. I had many phone calls. I've got to come up again, and I've got to come and talk to them, and but nothing materialized, nothing. And I made it very clear to them then, also to Buthelezi, if they want to have any input from my side, absolutely, I've got no problem. Quite simply because if we look at it from a bigger political perspective, from our perspective, now we can use our grouping of people as either the minorities, including the coloreds, or we can look at it from our perspective only as the whites. It'll, in both cases, be absolutely to our advantage if they also declare either UDI or secede. Quite simply because it just shows and proves to the world that we're not standing alone on this part of the world, being unhappy what the ANC is doing. Because remember, there are many Zulus in the ANC, many. So why do they want to secede? Because for the bigger nation of the Zulus, they're also not happy. So definitely, for us, it'll absolutely be to our advantage if they also want to secede or declare a UDI.
Okay, now the next question. Does it make sense for one or two or three groups? I'm going to call them now groups, just for argument's sake. One or two or three groups to go into an alliance and pursue the independence route.
Colin, if you look at international law says your group of people must be identified. Now, I assume what you're saying, different groupings, meaning the groupings that can't be grouped as a group of people. In this case, and again, I'll take the Zulus.
Let me explain it to you, Hein. Let me explain it to you. Okay, let's go. Say the Tswanas, the Boere, and the Zulus. They go into a loose alliance and say, we're going to pursue independence as a group.
Okay. As one group, they can't do it because in terms of international... In terms of international law, they can't be seen as a group. But as three different groups, they can work together
Yeah.
to then go and have independence. Now, again, the question is, how would you do it? Would you do it on a federal state or a confederate state? Again, that depends on the negotiations between those groupings. So therefore, the answer to you is, in terms of those groupings, is absolutely, of course, yes, because that means you don't want to not work with people, you want to work with your neighbors. And therefore, you respect your neighbors, the other group. You respect them for them to have their own independence as well. So therefore, you actually admit that you would adhere to the International Covenant on Human and Political Rights, Article 1. And that is, everybody must have the right to self-determination, to determine their own social, political, financial future. So it'll actually be much stronger if you can do it like that, yes.
That's what I was thinking. Now, what I want to ask you is Section 235 of any assistance for such a grouping, confederacy, or is it detrimental to the confederacy?
No, absolutely. I think I mentioned it the other night as well. Section 235, per se, although it's a worthless law that our so-called doctor, what do you call him, one of the Vaseline guys, have put in the Constitution, at least the incredibly important thing about it is that it actually states that in the Constitution you have the right to self-determination. So it's absolutely, Section 235 is absolutely to our advantage. There's no question about it.
So let me be crazy as I am. If the Tswanas and the Zulus and the Boere decide tomorrow we need that law, and the grouping of them goes to Parliament with a law to give embodiment to Section 235, is that a good plan or a bad plan?
Well, it's a political move, quite simply because the power, and in this case, the political power, is in the hands of the politicians. So the politicians can say, oh, well, you know what? Thank you for coming to come and see us. We're not happy to see you, but give the law here. We'll see what we want to do. And they throw it away. There's nothing you can do because they have got the political power. The interesting thing is you don't need them to put that law in place. That's why I said, remember one thing, in terms of the whole legal process, if, like you said, the Boere, the Zulus, the Tswanas, whoever, get together and say, well, we want a confederacy. How do we declare independence? You do it without Section 235.
Okay.
You do it on the basis of secession, and you do that quite simply because in our case, I have depleted all internal remedies. It's done. Spoken to the government, begged them, tried everything. And the last letter that our legal team, the advocate, wrote to the president was on this, I think it's the 17th of December, 2017 already, stating very clear, we hereby accept that all internal remedies have been exhausted and therefore are now organizing for secession. So the government knows exactly what we're doing. Of course, obviously, they are so arrogant, they basically just ignore it. But in the same sense, I must also say, then you've got your people in South Africa of the minorities, including the one political party that's supposed to fight for it, that are fighting against it. And then you ask yourself the question, why? Why would the people in South Africa not want to be governed by their own people? They themselves become part of that. Why not? We don't know. But the point is, that's a different discussion. The point is, we can declare independence once our people wants that. It's as simple as that.
That I can understand, and I agree with you, because I'm of the opinion that there is a fairly large portion of the white population that are quite content to be under rule of somebody. They were happy under the Dutch, they were happy under the British, they're happy under the ANC. They're happy. There's the other grouping in the whites, of which I would make a statement that the majority is actually Boere, not farmers, Boere. And they want independence, but because they're part of this bigger group called the Afrikaners, they are struggling with a lot of internal strife that prevents them from having a focused movement in the pursuit of independence. And that is where my fight with the Vaseline gang comes from. The Vaseline gang was supposed to be the representative of the Afrikaans and Afrikaner section, the Boere, that wanted self-determination. And the Boere were misled. And now there's a lot of anger. But I'm concerned that the anger is doing more divisional damage than uniting. Now, if the Zulus have the urge to go, it seems to me that it would be a logical move for them to find alliance with the Boere and the Tswanas and whoever grouping wants to go with them in a confederation. Does that make sense to you, Hein?
And it doesn't not only make sense to me, that was my suggestion to P.W. Botha, but it was also my suggestion to Marinus Wiegers. Professor Wiegers was basically the main writer, auditor, call it whatever you want to, of the new constitution. And the reality of that is that a confederation, and that's my personal view. Funny enough, a lot of people did not agree with me, and now a couple of years later, they see the other side of it, and they do agree with me that a confederation is a much better political system than a federation. Why? Very simple. Because, and let me make it clear, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that doesn't understand the difference between a confederation and a federation. In our case, a federation would be this grouping, that grouping, that grouping, that grouping, all together, doing their own thing in their own area, but you have a central government. The central government,
like the US.
Like the US, but that central government has got all the power. So suddenly when things start going wrong, that central government, the whiteys start telling the Zulus what to do. Alternatively, the Zulus start telling the whiteys or the Boere what to do, or the Tswanas, or whatever. That's why this whole concept, you had discussions earlier about tribalism. Tribalism is how this world started, and tribalism is how it should go back to. And confederate system is closer to that than a federal system. And that's the reason why I say each for himself, each one on his own. Because it doesn't matter. I mean, I grew up in Cape Town, and the reality is, as much as I know the colours and the Cape colours, I don't know all the intricacies of the different smaller cultural differences that we have. Although in general we do have the same culture, but I don't know the smaller things. So how can I tell them what to do if I don't understand? Let's say I'm in charge of their area in some way. I would mean very good to say something, and I would be totally taken up wrong by 99% of them, because they don't understand that I don't understand in that specific way that we're talking about. It was wrong. So this is the whole point, where tribalism or a confederal system would always be better than for one person to be in charge of another person if they don't even understand each other's cultural heritage, their cultural systems at all. I mean, it's quite logic to me.
We saw the reality of these cultural innuendos during the starting period of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, when the EU became aware of the fact that China is busy sorting out a diplomatic solution between Iraq and Iran. And the European Union sent two people at different stages to the Middle East to try and derail that process. But they made a basic mistake. In both instances, they sent women. They sent women to go and talk to the Arabs. And any person that understands the Arab culture, there's no way that Arab sheikh is going to
And that's
listen
the
to a
whole
woman.
point, Colleen, is that the basic differences, let's assume it was definitely not meant as disrespect. It was most probably meant as let's rather send women because they won't be as forceful. But it was the total wrong thing. But then on the same sentence, I would say, wow, I can't believe for 1 second that they didn't know that it was a mistake. But that's a different thing again. The point
These things, these cultural bolsups, let me call it bolsups because there's no other word for it, happens because people have got a tendency not to respect other people's culture. Not their nationality, not their nation, their culture.
Yeah. Well, that's the point. I mean, I'm just thinking back of P.W. Botha on my own our visit to King Goodwill's Latini. It was for both of us. It was like, wow, the whole process that you go through before you get to the king. It's a whole cultural thing, and then the one guy comes in literally on his knees and stomach that brings a beer. It's like a what do they call it? A peace treaty beer, whatever they call. I don't know. I can't remember. Total new. I mean, I don't know it. That was the first time in my life. PW and myself looked at each other and said, "What's happening here? What is this?" No, this is culture. This is how they do it. Now, how can you govern somebody? And I'm talking about not somebody, not thousands, millions of those people, if you don't even understand basic things like that. You can't do it. They've got to govern themselves. If the Zulus wants to look after themselves in, for instance, a monarchy, why not? I mean, I've used the example how many times? If the Bushman wants to totally give up schools and say, no, we're going to go back to the Kalahari. We're going to put Springbok stuff over ourselves and we're going to hunt and make a living like that. Who the hell are we to tell them they may not? Who are we to tell them they must send their children to school? Why? That they can actually learn not to make a living from the veld? It's nonsense. This is the whole problem. And I mean, this problem started, I don't know, thousands of years ago when one country invaded another one. Then they wanted to change those people to their belief systems and ways of doing. It's nonsense. Then
we just saw it now most recently in my and your lifetime. We saw what the Americans were doing. They invade a country and then they want that country to be a democracy like America. And the people don't want it like that. They don't want it like that. They're not comfortable with not having a king or not having a sheikh or not having a warlord in charge of them. They feel dislocated because those are the systems that they understand. And if I say that one of the biggest sources of conflict in South Africa is cultural conflict, am I right or am I wrong?
Put it this way, I don't think the conflict is a cultural conflict. I think the political managing of people causes cultural conflict. That's the problem. This is the big thing. And again, I mean, I grew up in Cape Town. I don't know, for instance, the Zulus or any of the black tribes really. But I know some they will never greet you before you don't greet them.
Yes, you must speak first. You must
Yeah.
speak first.
How many times in my life did I get angry because people that started working for me doesn't greet me? I
Yeah.
didn't know that. Now the question is, who was wrong? Was he wrong not by greeting me because he now works for me, or was I wrong by getting angry because I didn't understand that was actually out of respect?
That is a
So that's
very
why I
big,
say,
that is such an important thing to understand. And then there's another thing that we, as whites, we want people to look us in the eye when we talk to them.
yeah,
Specifically to the Zulus, that is disrespectful. They not if they see you as their superior, they're not comfortable to look you in the eye. They look down to the ground. And it's small things like these that creates unnecessary issues. And there's something that is not bothering me, tickling me. Can you just give me an indication when you and Barbara and PV went to King Zwelithini? When was that? After his presidency or during his presidency or what?
it was the 16th of December 2004, 2003. 16th of
Okay.
December 2003,
Okay, so that was well after his presidency and
after
so.
his presidency. But he was still accepted with the king as a president.
Okay. I was just curious, and I thought, when did this happen? Because we never heard anything about it in the media. There was nothing in the
There was
media about it.
there were only media reports in the Natal Mercury and some other papers in Natal, because it was
Now,
totally unannounced. But I must also admit, it was totally unannounced.
okay. So from that discussions you had at that stage, which I now understand, I mean, I accept this 20 years ago. Do you think there's any possibility that any of the participants in those talks are still interested in continuing the talks?
Kulain put it this way: in the past 20 years, that's what I referred to earlier. I had many telephone calls from the people close to the king. And again, as I say, I don't know the intricacies in how the monarchy works, but then I was going to fly up, then it was cancelled, then we talk again, and then I was going to fly up, and then it was cancelled. So it was an ongoing process that this should be discussed, and it should be discussed very seriously, that the Zulus want to secede as well. Obviously, part of that discussion would also be what happens if they secede? What happens to the Indians and the whites in Natal? And I can tell you, Buthelezi, Zwelithini, and I can't remember his name, but funny enough, I remember his surname. His surname was Zulu. He was the premier of Natal at that stage. Made it very clear that the people that stay there that are from Natal are members of that area and will be treated with all the respect that any citizen of a country would have. They will not be, and that was made very clear, they will not be treated like the coloureds and the whites are treated at the moment or at that stage. I think it's actually
Now,
years ago.
I can confirm what you are saying, Hein, from the people that I am in discussion with. I asked the one guy pertinently, what about the white folks? To me, what about them? Of course, we want them here. That's their land. But the big thing is, if they go, we die of hunger. Why would we do something stupid like that? But there's another thing. Okay, but that we'll discuss on another stage. So, in conclusion, then, are you willing to talk to any tribe? I'm going to call it tribes now. Any tribe that wants to go the independence route. Are you open for assisting them? Because you're the guy that's got the knowledge. You've got the technical knowledge.
The answer is very simple. Absolutely. Of course, I'll talk to anybody. Quite simply because at the end of the day, it's to everybody. And this is why I say it's not only to the minorities or to the whites, it's to everybody's advantage. The more tribes or groupings of people would like to secede or declare UDI. Absolutely. So
Thank you
what
for
I'm
that
saying
one.
openly, I am willing to talk to anybody. The new king, I've never met him. I've never spoken to him of the Zulus. If they want to talk, I'm more than willing to talk and let them know exactly what it's about. Because at the end of the day, as I say, it's a very, very difficult and technical thing to start off totally on its own. Quite simply because, and it's not their mistake, but 99.9% of all attorneys and advocates doesn't have a clue what secession is about, doesn't have a clue what international law is about. And you can't blame them because they never work with it. And this is what I've
Okay.
done now for the past 9 years. So absolutely, and this is an open invitation to any of the tribes. If they want to talk and work together, let's work together and get away from this mess, because let's now be honest about this. We are in a so-called democracy. Democracy for whom? And I don't want to go into a political discussion, but the question is for whom? And the answer is actually very simple: only to the people in power. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
what color your skin or what language you speak. It's only when you are power then you are in a democratic system. Otherwise, it's just bad for you. So the moment that each and every system can go back to their own people, that's the only way that we will all have genuine freedom again.
Okay. So, in conclusion, then, me and you agree that tribe, tribal is the correct way to address the whole issue. You are willing to talk to any tribe that wants to pursue that route, and you are also of the opinion that an alliance of a number of tribes that proposes a confederation between them is a good way to proceed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hein,
Absolutely. Because a confederate system in the current mess up that we have, that is called South Africa, doesn't work, because the less than handful of people sitting there stealing us totally rotten will bring everybody down, and they are busy bringing us down.
from the discussions I have and the people that I talk to, there is a lot of, and I'm now going to call them conservative Zulus, conservative Tswamas. They're deeply distressed about the fact that their, and I'm going to call it land for argument's sake, that their land has been destroyed to the levels where it is today. They are unhappy if they think back on how it was in their countries, their states, their homelands, their what before 94, and they look at what they have today. They are extremely upset about it because they say that it is quite clear that their population have been impoverished and the elite group in the ANC has been enriched, and a small selection of people, a small cabal, is basically running the show and is having all the power and has taken as much of the country's riches as they could.
Colleen, you see, one of the sections in our current constitution is Section 9. Section 9 refers to equal treatment of each and every citizen. Now, the interesting thing about Section 9 is that it's totally been ignored. Now, there are so many examples of this that I don't want to go into the other side of it. But let's just take, for instance, the Inkonyama Trust of the Zulus. Inkonyama Trust was formed, and there are many thousands of hectares part of Inkonyama Trust. Now the question is, will the Ngomyana Trust be kept out of this land grab of the ANC, or will it be part of it? If I use my logic, but then my logic is not their logic, and I'm talking about the ANC money grabbers, then I would say, well, they won't touch it. They won't touch it quite simply because they know they're going to have problems from the Zulus. So let's assume, for argument's sake of this argument, that they leave the Ngomyana Trust out of it and they don't touch it. Then the next question is, what happens if somebody makes a constitutional case against the government and says, you've taken my farm, his farm, that place, this, that, and that. It's not equal treatment because you haven't taken any of the Ngomyana Trust.
Yeah.
So this is why I say, what are they going to do then? They can't just ignore it. And what South Africa has done now with the bribe money that they got from Iran to go to the International Criminal Court, they've opened a floodgate of cases that can and will be made against the ANC government, because suddenly they have put themselves, they thought they put themselves on the pedestal, they've put themselves on the chopping block, because they thought that they're making themselves absolutely untouchable. They made themselves more choppable, more attackable, because they are not even close to squeaky clean. They are not even clean.
I've mentioned it once in one of my Skidmarks that at a stage in my previous life, let's call it my previous life, one of the lawyers, it was a late Saturday afternoon and we had to do an urgent application. And he said to me, Colleen, just remember one thing. Do not go to court with dirty hands. And that has stuck in my mind. I mean, it's now 1,000 years in history, but it's here. I remember that so clear. And when the ANC started this bullshit with the ICJ, I said to some of the guys that I'm talking to, and I said, Poppy, watch that one. They're going to make it possible for us to whip them with their own shambok.
That's the whole point. Yeah, there are so many sayings that actually, but even the Bible talks about it. But the one thing that we love to use always is people in glass houses don't throw stones. The Bible talk about the tree in your eye, and you look at the splinter in the other guy's eye. So yeah, the point is we agree on that what the ANC has done here is again 30 years later, typical them. They only look at money and they don't look at the consequences. Because now the question is, after this case in The Hague, what did they achieve? The answer is very simple. They've achieved money for themselves, but in terms of the law, in terms of the case, nothing. They've actually achieved nothing.
What they actually did achieve is to put themselves, as you say, on the chopping block here in South Africa.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. I got to do this, and you must forgive me for it, because I need some. Section 9 of the Constitution. Does Section 9 not give the Vaseline gang all the weapons they need to fight affirmative action and BEE?
Colin, it goes much further than that. And let's call the Vaseline gang by the name. Where is legal doctor? He calls himself a doctor. Corneille Muller, or must I say Mulder, which he sends me WhatsApps about that I'm pronouncing it wrong. Shame, Corneille. I feel sorry for you. That it's more important to concentrate on how you pronounce your surname than you doing your job. Colin, the answer is, and I have asked it how many times, where is specifically Corneille Muller in government, and not addressing Section 9 in terms of so many things? And remember, this Section 9 goes down from, let's start at literally street level. Why does municipalities have different, listen to this, different laws when it comes to building regulations in certain areas than in other areas? It's against the Constitution. You may not do it. But the municipality will very quickly tell you, well, if you want to go and live there, go and live there. That is not an answer. It's illegal what they're doing. But it's also illegal in terms of much higher, much more important things. Where are they? Where is Corneille Miller and his Vaseline friends? I still want to hear from you actually how do they use the Vaseline, but that's a different story. Where are they? We are too busy with the Vaseline, perhaps. But the point is, what they are doing or not doing is actually stabbing their own people, the minorities of this country. And I'm talking about the minorities because the minorities is the word that is used in Section 3 of the Freedom Front's Constitution. They are stabbing us in the back. What are they doing? And the answer is very simple. Obviously, on the one hand, nothing, and on the other hand, only earning salaries and enriching themselves. Why does somebody like you and me and other people have to do this? To make people aware. I've been doing this for 9 years. Question, and this comes back to the whole thing. If I didn't start 9 years ago, the whole word of self-determination, UDI, secession, wouldn't have even been known. Why did they fight me on that while they were supposed to do it? But I carried on, and luckily today we know that many, many, many people know what secession and self-determination is about. So the answer is why they're not doing it. That is something that they've got to answer. And I can just hope and pray that they will stand in court one day to answer those questions. After our last conversation, I got how many WhatsApps from Corneille Miller attacking me? Really?
Oh, well.
Instead
Welcome to
of
the club.
giving answers to the allegations. But then again, he thinks he's extremely clever. He got away with it so long that he thinks he's going to get away with it forever. Not if it depends on me. He will not get away with it.
Well, I'm with you.